Today on TimesCast, it's the first day in court for suspected looters as Britain faces a fifth day of rioting. The op-ed columnist Roger Cohen on possible motivations for Britain's disgruntled youth. And fears over weakness in European banks create a shaky session for US stocks.
In London, peace has returned to the streets after an overwhelming police effort with 16,000 police officers on the streets. But on a fourth night of rioting, it spread to Birmingham, Liverpool, and Manchester, where there's footage coming back of kids setting fire to shops. Meanwhile, in a London court today, which is running 24 hours to cope with the extra influx of arrested people, 59 of the people accused of looting and rioting had their day of justice. These crimes that added up to hundreds of millions of pounds worth of damage and left London burning. A lot of the crimes are incredibly minor. There was a woman accused of stealing 6 bottles of nail varnish and a tin of food, a man accused of stealing cakes. But when you've added them up over the last 3 or 4 days, they've left Britain reeling and questioning the very nature of its society. It was surprising to many people watching the trials that there were people as old as 46. There was a teaching assistant, a graphic designer. People were very apologetic in court. They said that they got swept up in the moment. They regretted it instantly. British police have been very restrained or very soft on the rioters. They've just been using batons, which they've used very sparingly, and generally just used the sheer force of their numbers. But now, with the public attitude turning very much against the rioters, Prime Minister David Cameron has said he'll authorise maybe the use of water cannons and plastic bullets. I guess we'll see over the next few days whether those more stringent measures are effective.
This outbreak of violence and rioting across the UK has shocked many people with its images of hooded youths smashing windows. There's clearly an element of vandalism, but there's also a great deal of social frustration. 1 in 5 of kids aged 16 to 24 in the UK is out of a job. There are also racial elements to what has happened. It was a black kid who was killed at the outset. There is unease about racial integration in the UK. And this phenomenon in Britain has been particularly violent, but these feelings of exclusion are not peculiar to Britain. This is coming on top of a long series of protests in Spain, also in Greece, to some degree also in Tel Aviv, where the feeling is the rich are doing fine and there's no housing for the poor. And what needs to be understood is that this is coming at a time of cutbacks. There are deficits everywhere in Europe. There's a crisis of the euro. Governments are cutting back. In Britain, even the police is being cut at a time when Prime Minister Cameron is now trying to send another 10,000 police out into the streets. So the context is one of falling opportunity for the young and ever greater cuts from governments in benefits with no end in sight. Meanwhile, Cameron, the British Prime Minister, has been off in Tuscany on vacation. He's rushed back, but he rushed back rather late. He's behind the curve and he's trying to catch up. He's promising a police fight back on the 4th day of this. One problem, however, is that to many people in the UK, David Cameron, an old Etonian from the most exclusive school in the UK, from a wealthy family, represents a class of people who, for these youths, seem oblivious to their problems, their predicament, their inability to find jobs, and their inability just to find a place in society.
And a lack of confidence in European banks causes uncertainty in the markets.
Back in 2008, what really drove the financial crisis was nervousness by American banks about lending to one another. That's not happening now, but what we are seeing is nervousness in Europe about banks lending to one another there. That makes people nervous here because American banks are closely intertwined with their European partners. You've got hundreds of billions of dollars flowing between the biggest banks every day, so a problem in France or Germany is felt in America very quickly. For example, the cost of borrowing for French banks and other European institutions went up Wednesday and has been going up since the end of July fairly sharply. That makes it more expensive for them to borrow and undermines confidence in the system overall. To make matters worse, investors and traders on both sides of the Atlantic are worried that policymakers don't have the tools to stem the panic this time.